video, we're going to look at using the fan out step so that each row or staff member's info that we have in our Google Sheet is checked by our workflow. So we'll click the plus sign and we will add a fan out step. And in our fan out step, we'll adjust this description to be staff info. The fan out step wants to know which array we want to fan out. At this point, we could fan out any array that is above the fan out step. We only have really one option here, which is that we want to fan out the results from our Google Sheet. So we'll click into step 3 and we want to fan out each row of our sheet here. And the steps are numbered. They start with the very first trigger step. So step 1, step 2, step 3. That's how we know that we're also referencing the correct step in our Google Sheet to fan out the results. Just a quick note here about arrays. An array is effectively just a list of items. We can see our array of staff members if we go back to our Google Sheet step and we test the step, and it will return the first 20 items from our sheet listed all together within a single array. If I click on the square brackets here, I can see that every result is between these square brackets, and that is the single array with 20 different items listed inside of it. Arrays begin with 0 as the first item. You can see here that our last item is 19, but there are actually 20 items because the first item is item 0. So just a quick note to remember that arrays begin with 0, and you know that a list is an array because it is between those square brackets. So for each item in the array, we want to check if that specific staff member's birthday or start date is within the next week. What our fan out step does is effectively takes one item at a time to do that check. So we're looking at the preview data for item number 1 of 20. And so for everything that falls now within this square, within the fan out step, effectively what we're saying is check each item one at a time for the following steps. So we're going to add a conditional step. We're going to click this plus sign here, add the conditional, and we'll call this staff celebration, question mark. What we want our logic to do is to answer the question of whether or not we're celebrating a specific staff member within the next week. For our rules, we want to check if the instance, so the single item that we're looking at, that is referred to as an instance, if the single instance has a birthday after today and before 7 days from now, or if the instance or staff member has a start month day after today and before 7 days from now. So we're actually checking two different things. We're checking whether or not they have a birthday within the next 7 days and whether or not they have a work anniversary by checking that start month day within the next 7 days. So for our rules, we're going to click into the fan out and we will check instance birthday. Date is after today. And to get today, we're going to go to our function step and we have result from today and birthday. So that same instance birthday is before the other date that we created in our function step 7 days from now. So this is initially the logic to just check for a birthday within the next 7 days. We're going to click or, and we're also going to check for a work anniversary. So we'll go to that same instance of the fan out and we'll check start month day. Date time is after. Again, we'll do a result today, and we will add the 7 days from now as well. So before from our function step, 7 days from now. So our logic is checking for a birthday within the next week or a work anniversary within the next week. Let's test this step. Great, so we can see that the test returned no. And if we go back to our fan out, because we're just in a testing mode right now, we're only looking at one single instance that's being passed through. So this is the data that this conditional ended up checking. So Miles Yates has a birthday in February and a start month day in December. So that's correct. He would not have a birthday or a work anniversary within the next week. This tutorial is being recorded in mid-August. So we can double check our logic by forcing some data into the test. Let's go back to our Google Sheet step. Actually, let's go into the sheet itself. And what we can do here is we can look for a staff member that we should be celebrating this week. So if we scroll up to the top here, there we go. It looks like Lucy has a birthday within the next week. So we can filter our data to just include Lucy so that we can make sure that everything is working as expected. So if we go back into our staff celebration step, again, this filter can be handy for testing. Okay, so we'll select first name, string exactly matches Lucy. And if we test this step, we should just get that single result. Perfect. So now that we have that filter on our sheet, we can ensure that this is the only instance that's going to be passed through the rest of our workflow as we are testing so that we can test our logic. So if we click on the fan out step now, we can see that the preview data now is 1 of 1 instead of 1 of 20. And we can see that we're just looking at Lucy here and her information. And now if we go into our staff celebration step and we click test step, we have a yes, because Lucy has a birthday coming up within the next week on August 17th. Perfect. So we have the yes that we were looking for. We won't remove the Lucy filter just yet because it's convenient to have the result that we want to build out the next step in our workflow, which will be getting Lucy's info so that we can get an email notifying our chief people officer that Lucy has a birthday in the next week. To do this, under yes, we'll click the plus sign under this stream of our conditional because we only want to send the info of staff members that meet our criteria. So if somebody doesn't have a birthday or work anniversary within the next week, they would be filtered down the no stream. And we could add a step to notify or to do some action for those staff members that fall into the no stream. But for this example, we just want an action if they fall into the yes stream. So we're going to add a function step and we will call this step get staff member. And inside this function step, we just want to list the parameters that we'll want to be sent in our email. Here, when we click add, we can see that we're requested to enter a parameter name. And so we are going to look for the staff member's first name, their last name, their birthday, start month day, and their start year. So this is where we can enter in their start year, even though we didn't filter for their start year in the staff celebration conditional, we can enter it in here. It's going to pull that information from the instance. So we'll be able to see how many years of service that staff member has because we'll be able to reference their start year in the email that goes out to our chief people officer. Great. So now we just need to pull in those values from our fan out step. Each value is coming from the same instance for now, but instance is dynamic. So for each line in our Google Sheet, effectively this is going to pull the first name, last name, birthday, start month day, and start year. Great, so we've defined our parameters, and now in our function step, I'm just going to copy and paste in the code that was previously written here, which just returns each of those parameters as a string in our function step here. So first name is going to equal parameters.firstname, which is referencing this first name parameter, and so on. So if we test this step, we can see that our result is exactly what we expect it to be. We have Lucy Dixon, her birthday, start month day, and start year. So this result looks pretty well exactly like our result from our fan out. And that's because we want to pull in everything that is there. But as you can imagine, there might be much more data on a staff member apart from just these 3 or 4 key metrics that we're using for this purpose. So if our Google Sheet had 10 or 20 different columns, this would be the step where we are just focusing in on which columns we want to pull in for our result. And in our case, we want to return all 5 that are currently there. But again, if there were 20 or 30 columns for each staff member, then we would only be pulling in the ones that we're looking for specifically from each instance. So now that we have all of the info that we will want to send along in an email, let's go back to our sheet step and remove the Lucy filter. So we will remove the Lucy filter, and now we can test our workflow. So instead of just testing the step, let's test the entire workflow, which will now take us through all of the steps that we've created so far for just the first 20 staff members on our list. Great. Looks like it was a successful test. And if we click into each of these steps, we can see the data that is being sent in and out of each step. So we can see our dates. We can see the array of 20 staff members, so beginning at 0 and going all the way to 19. It's only pulling in 20 of the 50 because we're in this test mode. We can see our fan out and that everything in that array that gets pulled in is being fanned out into each individual item. And if we scroll down, we can see that the conditional, the staff celebration question, looks like it checks all 20. So we can count them 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have those first 10, and if we load more, we can see the second 10. So we can see that every instance is being checked for that staff celebration. And it looks like we have 3 staff members that ended up with a yes. So we have Lucy, who has a birthday within the next week, and we have Brittany, who has a work anniversary within the next week. And lastly, we have Jada, who also has a work anniversary within the next 7 days. So they all flowed through the yes column and ended up hitting the get staff member function step, which is how we know that they traveled through the yes side. We could also check into the conditionals and see if we could spot which one was a yes, but these first ones that I've checked have been no's. And so there would be 3 yeses in this group of 20 that led to each of them getting to this function step. So the last part of our workflow is to bring all of the yeses together so that we can send out one email with all of the info. If we were to add a step here and click this plus sign and add a step inside of the fan out, a separate email would be sent for each yes. So in this case, we would actually end up with three separate emails, which we want to avoid because, of course, we would only end up with three. But if you're running a different workflow, you could end up with dozens or hundreds of individual emails being sent instead of aggregating that data into one single email. So we'll look at how to do that in the next video.